Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard. So the district attorney is going to be the guy who decides whether or not to charge the officers, charge the crimes. And that's this gentleman here, Paul Howard. Howard said that Brooks presented, so this is the guy who just filed the charges or just announced that the charges were coming today. Howard said that Brooks presented no threat to the officers who knew that the taser had been stolen. It had been deployed twice, and therefore it was rendered useless, which is another great point, right? When you fire a taser, it's got these little cartridges that go on the top. And inside each one of those cartridges, it's like a casing for a bullet. But essentially, it explodes open. You have these two pins that jump out at you and they stick into you. They've got these little barbs on the end of it. And once that's been fired, it's fired. You don't get to wheel back in those little pins and like a fishing rod. You don't get to shove them back in there. You have to take off that whole clip, toss it, put a new one on, and now your taser is functional again. So did Rayshard have any other? Did he swap those out? I mean, he's already discharged at some point. So even if you thought it was a deadly weapon, or even if you wanted to speculate and say, well, he could have tased them and then done them harm, we don't see any evidence of that. So therefore, I can't jump in on that camp that says it was a deadly weapon, because I think it clearly wasn't. So Fulton County District Attorney Paul Howard says once Mr. Brooks was shot, there is Atlanta policy that requires that officers have to provide timely medical attention, but he was shot for 2 minutes and 12 seconds. There was no medical attention applied to Mr. Brooks. So that's according to Paul Howard. I have not dissected the timeline that well, but it is something I'm going to look forward to, because I did see some body cam footage of the officers actually doing something with him, trying to roll him around. I heard one officer say, "Hey, breathe, Mr. Brooks, breathe," because they knew that he was dying. And I think it was actually the same cop who shot him who knew that he was going to die as a result of his bullets. He's saying, "Keep breathing," because he knew he should not have pulled the trigger on that. He also says what we discovered is during the 2 minutes and 12 seconds that Officer Rolfe, that he was on the ground, Officer Rolfe kicked Mr. Brooks while he laid on the ground fighting for his life. The other officer, Officer Brosnan, stood on Mr. Brooks' shoulders while he was there struggling for his life. And Paul Howard concludes, based on the way these officers conducted themselves, that the demeanor immediately after the shooting did not reflect any fear or danger, but reflected other kinds of emotions. And I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. I don't see any reason why they would be fearful. I can see, so there's a point when this is all going on when I think it goes from a justified shooting to a non-justified shooting. And that point really is when Rayshard starts running away. When they're still in the middle of the altercation, when they're on top of each other, if one of the cops would have pulled out a gun and shot him in that time span, I would have agreed it was a justified shooting. But when a man is running away, literally running away, you can't justify that anymore. It's just not, it's not justifiable. And we're going to talk about some case law and some rules that show you that. So here is an actual video that, or an actual image that Miss Faith found, which this is the first time I've actually seen this. She just slipped this in here, very sly. Here is Officer Rolfe kicking Brooks. And that looks like a kick to me. That looks like a pretty hard kick. Pretty hard right there. Normally when I first heard that he kicked him, I thought maybe he just kind of nudged him, nudged his arms, like kicked his arms up to see if he, had a weapon, to kind of do a scene assessment. And doesn't look like that at all to me. This looks like somebody is just gearing up to kick a field goal. And of course, that is not appropriate for somebody that you just shot and who is dying on the road. Not okay.